Look, I need to talk to you about one of the most wealth-destroying decisions that people make consistently, repeatedly, throughout their lives without ever really thinking about the opportunity cost. I'm talking about buying cars, and before you dismiss this as just another personal finance lecture, understand that this is about capital allocation, about compound growth, about the difference between looking wealthy and actually building wealth. I'm Raoul Pal, and I've spent my career analyzing how capital moves, how wealth is created, and why most people never achieve financial independence despite earning decent incomes. And one of the biggest culprits I see again and again is the car trap. People pour hundreds of thousands of dollars over their lifetime into depreciating assets, never realizing they're destroying their ability to compound wealth. This isn't about being cheap. This isn't about denying yourself transportation. This is about understanding the mathematics of wealth building and making rational decisions about how you deploy scarce capital. Because every dollar you spend on a car is a dollar that can't compound for 20, 30, 40 years, and that compound growth is the difference between financial freedom and working until you're 70. Let me start with the fundamental problem. Cars are depreciating assets. The moment you drive a new car off the lot, it loses 20 minus 30 of its value. Instantly. You haven't even gotten home yet, and you've lost thousands of dollars. Over the first 5 years, a typical new car loses 60 minus 70 of its value. You're watching your capital evaporate in real time. Now, some of you are thinking, but Raoul, I need a car, I need transportation. What am I supposed to do? And you're right, in most of the US, you need transportation. Let me give you the math that car dealers and luxury brands don't want you to see. Let's say you're 28 years old, you've been working for a few years, you've saved some money, and you decide you want a nice car. You go out and buy a $60,000 vehicle, maybe you finance it, maybe you pay cash, doesn't really matter for this example. That car, over the next 10 years, is going to cost you enormously. The purchase price, the interest if you financed it, insurance, maintenance, gas, registration. By the time you're 38, you've spent maybe $8,000 on that car, and it's worth perhaps $15,000. You've destroyed $65. 0.0075000 of capital. But here's what's worse, and this is the part that should make you sick. It's not just the money you lost on the car, it's the money you didn't make by not investing that capital. This is opportunity cost, and it's the most important concept in finance that nobody understands. If instead of buying that $60,000 car, you bought a reliable $15,000 used vehicle and invested the $45,000 difference in a diversified portfolio earning 8% annually, do you know what that becomes over 30 years? And that's just one car purchase. Most people upgrade their cars every 5 to 7 years. If you're consistently overspending on vehicles throughout your 20s, 30 seconds and 40 seconds, you're destroying millions of dollars in potential wealth. Literally millions. The compound effect over multiple purchases and multiple decades is staggering. This is what I mean when I say cars are wealth suicide. It's not hyperbole. It's math. Every dollar you allocate to a depreciating asset is a dollar that can't compound. And compounding is the only free lunch in finance. It's how you get from middle class to wealthy. But you can't access the power of compounding if you're constantly draining your capital into metal boxes on wheels. Now let me talk about the psychology of this, because this is where most people go wrong. We've been conditioned by decades of advertising to believe that cars are status symbols, that the type of car you drive says something about your success, your taste, your worth as a person. It's complete nonsense, but it's incredibly powerful. Nonsense. People make $80,000 a year and buy $50,000 cars to signal success. They're not successful, they're broke, they're in debt, they have no savings, no investments, no cash flow, but they look successful because they're driving a German luxury sedan. It's theater, it's a performance of wealth rather than actual wealth. I learned this lesson early in my career. When I was building my business, when I was actually accumulating capital that would eventually give me financial freedom, I drove modest cars, not because I was being noble or frugal for its own sake, but because I understood that every pound, every dollar I didn't spend on a car was capital I could deploy into investments, into building businesses, into assets that would generate returns. The wealthy people I know, the people with real generational wealth, they often drive fairly modest vehicles, or if they do drive expensive cars, it's because they can afford to, meaning the car represents maybe 2-3 of their net worth, not 50% or 100%. They're not sacrificing their financial security to drive a nice car. They've already achieved financial security, and the car is just a trivial expense at that point. But for most people, buying an expensive car means sacrificing investments, sacrificing savings, taking on debt. It means prioritizing immediate gratification and social signaling over long-term wealth building, and that's a trade-off that will keep you working for decades longer than necessary. Let me give you my framework for thinking. about cars, because I am not telling you to never own a vehicle or to drive a beater that breaks down every month. I'm telling you to be strategic and rational about this purchase. First principle, a car is a utility, not an investment. Its purpose is to get you from point A to point B reliably. That's it. Any money you spend beyond what's necessary for reliable transportation is waste from a capital allocation perspective. You're paying for brand, for status, for features you don't need. That's fine if you're wealthy and can afford waste. But if you're trying to build wealth, you cannot afford waste. Second principle, buy used, pay cash. A 3 to 5-year-old car from a reliable brand Toyota, Honda, Mazda will cost 40–50 less than the new version and will be just as functional. You're letting the first owner eat the depreciation. And by paying cash, you're avoiding interest costs and the psychological burden of monthly payments. Third principle, drive it for a long time. The longer you keep a car, the lower your annualized cost of transportation. If you buy a used car for $20,000 and drive it for 10 years, your cost is $2,000 per year plus maintenance. If you buy a new car for $50,000 and trade it in after 5 years, your cost is $10,000 per year plus maintenance. The math is obvious. Fourth principle, invest the difference. This is the critical part. If you're spending $500 per month less on car payments by following the first 3 principles, that $500 needs to go into an investment account automatically, not into your checking account where you'll spend it on other things, into an investment account where it compounds over decades. Now let me address the common objections, because I know what you're thinking. But Raoul, what about safety? Aren't newer cars safer? Yes, newer cars have more advanced safety features, but a 2018 Toyota Camry is still very safe. You don't need a 2024 luxury SUV to be safe. The marginal safety benefit doesn't justify the massive cost difference. What about reliability? Won't an older car break down more? Potentially, yes, but modern cars from reliable brands can easily go 200,000–300,000 miles with proper maintenance, and even if you spend $2,000 a year on repairs, that's still way cheaper than the depreciation and interest costs on a new car. What about electric vehicles? Shouldn't I buy a Tesla to save on gas? Maybe, if the math works out in your specific situation, but remember, EVs are expensive upfront. The gas savings might not offset the higher purchase price for many years, and the environmental argument, while valid, is separate from the financial argument. I'm talking purely about wealth building here. What if I need a car for work? What if I'm in sales and need to project success? If your job genuinely requires a nice car, that's a business expense and should be evaluated differently. But be honest with yourself, does your job actually require it, or are you just using that as an excuse? Most jobs don't care what you drive. Let me give you a different perspective on this. I think about money in terms of freedom. How much capital do I need invested and generating returns to cover my living expenses without working? That's the retirement calculation, but it's also the financial independence calculation. The more expenses you have, the more capital you need invested. If you drive a modest car, your transportation costs might be $500 per month, including insurance, gas, and maintenance. If you drive a luxury car with payments, insurance, and higher maintenance costs, it might be $1,500 per month. Is it worth it? For some people, maybe, if you're passionate about cars, if driving brings you genuine joy, if you've already achieved financial security, fine. But for most people, the car is not bringing them proportional happiness. They adapt to it within a few months and it becomes normal. But the financial damage is permanent. Here's another way to think about it: time horizon. When you buy a car, you're making a decision that affects the next 5 to 10 years. But when you invest money instead of spending it on a car, you're making a decision that affects the next 30 to 40 years because of compounding. The car depreciates and eventually becomes worthless. The investment compounds and eventually becomes substantial wealth. Which decision do you want to make? The one that serves your ego for a few years, or the one that serves your financial freedom for decades? Now, let me talk about alternatives, because in some situations you might not even need to own a car at all. If you live in a city with good public transit, if you can walk or bike to work, if you can use ride-sharing services, these options might be cheaper than owning a car, even a modest one. I know people who live in New York, London, San Francisco. They don't own cars. They use Uber, they use public transit, they rent cars when they need to leave the city. And when you calculate the total cost of ownership, purchase, depreciation, insurance, parking, maintenance, they're often spending less on transportation than car owners. Even if you're in a suburban area, you might be surprised by the math. If you only drive 10,000 miles a year and it's not every day, ride-sharing might be competitive with ownership, and you get back the time you would have spent on maintenance, registration, and dealing with car problems. Time is valuable, and most people don't factor that into the equation. For those who do need to own a car regularly, consider the minimum viable option. What's the least expensive reliable car that meets your actual needs? Not your wants, not your status aspirations, your actual functional transportation needs. For most people, that's a 5 to 10-year-old sedan from a reliable brand. It's not exciting, but it works, and it frees up capital for investing. Let me bring this back to the macro perspective, because this isn't just about individual decisions. It's about how societies build wealth or fail to build wealth. Countries with high car ownership costs and long commutes tend to have lower savings rates. People are pouring so much money into transportation that they can't save and invest. Meanwhile, societies that prioritize public transit, walkability, and lower transportation costs tend to have higher savings rates and wealth accumulation. This isn't coincidental. When people aren't spending 15–20% of their income on cars, they have more capacity to invest, to build businesses, to take risks that lead to wealth creation. In the US specifically, we've built an entire economy around car dependency. The suburbs, the highway system, the entire urban form is designed around everyone owning a car. And that's great for the auto industry, for banks that finance cars, for insurance companies, but it's terrible for individual wealth building. You are essentially forced to spend tens of thousands of dollars on transportation just to participate in the economy, and that structural cost is keeping millions of people from achieving financial independence. It's a tax on wealth building that nobody talks about. So what's the action plan? What do you actually do with this information? First, if you currently have a car payment on a vehicle that is worth more than 30–40% of your annual income, you need to seriously consider selling it. Yes, you might take a loss. Yes, it might feel bad, but you're stopping the bleeding. You're ending a situation where you're hemorrhaging capital every month. Sell the expensive car, pay off the loan, and buy a reliable used vehicle with whatever is left. If there's nothing left or if you're underwater, this becomes harder, but you still need to plan your exit. Don't trade in for another new car in 3 years. Drive what you have until it's paid off, then replace it with something modest. Second, if you're currently car-free or driving a modest vehicle, resist lifestyle inflation. As your income grows, you're going to be tempted to upgrade. Your peers will upgrade. You'll see ads. You'll feel like you deserve something nicer. Resist, keep driving the modest car, and invest the difference between what you could spend and what you are spending. Third, run the math on your specific situation. Calculate what you're actually spending on transportation annually all in, including depreciation. Then calculate what that money would become if invested over 20 to 30 years at reasonable return assumptions. Make the opportunity cost visible and concrete. Most people never do this calculation, so they never feel the pain of the lost investment returns. Fourth, if you absolutely must have a nice car if it brings you genuine, sustained happiness if you have run the numbers, and you can afford it without sacrificing your financial goals, then lease rather than buy. Let the manufacturer eat the depreciation. You're paying for the use of the car, not the asset itself. And you can walk away every few years without being stuck with a depreciated asset. But here's the catch. You should only do this if you're already financially secure. If you're still building wealth, if you don't have substantial investments, if you're not maxing out tax-advantaged accounts, you cannot afford to lease a luxury car. You need every dollar working for you in investments. Fifth, and this is critical, automate your investments. Whatever money you're saving by not overspending on a car, set up an automatic monthly transfer to an investment account. Don't rely on willpower to invest what's left over at the end of the month. Make it automatic. Make it the default. That's the only way it actually happens consistently. Let me close with this. Financial freedom is about choices. It is about having enough invested capital generating returns that you don't have to work if you don't want to, that you can take risks, pursue passions, weather downturns, retire early. Whatever freedom means to you, it requires capital, a lot of capital. And you cannot build that capital if you're constantly draining it into depreciating assets. The car decision alone, repeated over a lifetime, could be the difference between retiring at 55 with financial security and working until 70 while worrying about money. That's not an exaggeration. When you compound the savings over decades, when you factor in multiple car purchases, when you include the opportunity cost of not investing, we are talking about 7 figures of difference in net worth. One decision pattern, repeated consistently, determines whether you achieve financial independence or not. So the question is, what do you value more? Driving a nice car for a few years, or having financial freedom for the rest of your life? For me, the answer has always been obvious. I'd rather be free than look impressive to strangers at stoplights who don't care about me anyway. If this resonates, if you're ready to make different choices, leave a comment and tell me what you're driving and what you're going to do differently. Share this with someone who's about to make a terrible car purchase. And subscribe, because we are going to keep talking about the capital allocation decisions that actually determine whether you build wealth or stay broke. The math is clear. The choice is yours. Choose freedom.